everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to talk to composer Tim Feeney about the piece that he wrote that Aaron Damast interpreted. So let me invite Tim Feeney and see if he's around, which I know he is because, spoiler alert, we planned this, and talk about his piece that he wrote. How are you doing there?
Having my moment. It looks a little bright from my left. I might try to steer around this a little bit. Hey, Anthony,
That's okay.
How are you?
So anyhow,
this is the first. Yep.
Pardon? This is the first what?
This is a first for me, like watching, there's the feed at the bottom, seeing who's joined. Whoa, hi, Toronto. This is fabulous. Neat.
Great.
Hey, Maria.
Well, you can keep track of the chat. I'll just introduce you while you wave at your friends, because I'm sure it's all of your all of your friends. Yeah, it's kind of fun to talk to you about being a composer, because I feel like you're super famous for being a percussionist. So
well, let's not get ahead of ourselves, but
I'll say you're more famous for being a great percussionist and a great teacher. And yeah, I've played in a couple pieces of yours at this point. Actually, kind of one of my nice pre-pandemic memories was playing in this really amazing piece that you put together for a show where you merged, I guess, like a quartet with one of your trios, and we all got together and played one of your pieces. And I was really, I don't know, I liked it. First of all, I printed out your piece because I am master dork. So this is this is pieces of paper with Tim Feeney's score on it. And I think I wanted people to understand that I'm not talking about like drum rolls notated on a piece of manuscript paper. And I feel like they're sort of they're like these poems that improvisation can live within, but they're these guidelines and they're rules, but they're not unbreakable rules. But then there are some that you certainly wouldn't want to break. And I'm just curious how you went from being, a improviser and a performer, and then what kind of tipped you over into this in this style of writing these text pieces?
Well, statistically, I just had the lucky opportunity several years ago that someone asked me, like, hey, I really like what you do. Could you make something for me or for us, this group that my friend was involved with, that sort of acts like the way that you hear? And I didn't really know what I was doing. As you can guess, I don't know, I remember this really strongly from my early 20s where I really didn't want anyone telling me what to do ever, and then also as a result, like, I didn't want to tell anyone else what to do ever. So, those of us filter our way into improvised scenes and communities, and that made perfect sense. So then how do I make sense of the opportunity for, like, where someone is suggesting, can you please tell me a way of acting that will sound like this thing that you like to do and experience that doesn't have any controls on it? And once the smoke cleared between my ears, this just seemed to make sort of sense. Most of us working in these styles and idioms, like, we have experience with text pieces going back 50 or 60 years, and just I don't know, like, there's something nice about this as a method that lets me, like, suggest directly, like, hey, there are some things you should do that are important, that if you listen for some sorts of things and you do some sorts of things in response to maybe these two other points you can listen for, if you haven't had a lot of experience, or maybe it's not your nature to do these sorts of things spontaneously, it'll give you a way to steer that seems analogous to, like, what we would do anyway. So, like 9 years ago, that was a practical step for, like, helping, in a practical sense, sort of with this younger group of players to launch something. But, like, for those of us that are playing together for a long time, or like you brought up the sextet we played at Red Cat last February, right before everything got extremely strange in the world, right? that seemed like an interesting experiment this way too, where we have like, you have this sort of brain too that is capable of executing the really dense instructions that are on the paper over your right shoulder, hiding over there in the recording booth, right?
Oh,
And then
yeah.
and then also you have ways you want to act that are yours in the world, right? Like,
Yeah.
so in that sense, that seemed like, wow, it's just in my head, this would be this amazing opportunity. Like, oh, all of my best friends want to make these things spontaneously. Like, let's do this. This will be cool. Oh, maybe I can like put a I don't know, I just remember this experiment from kindergarten, right, when I was really small, right, where like you get like the little jar of sugar water and then you drop the string in it, and then overnight the water draws out and this, like the crystal grows around the string, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, this
Yeah.
would be great. I can drop a string in the water, and now like the musicians I play with like can come up with something spontaneously that like, again, like acts how they normally want to hear and act in the world, but there's this like steering mechanism hiding in the background
Hmm.
that will also get you to do something maybe that would not be your tendency anyway.
Yeah, I totally that's how I felt when I had the scores. It's funny, Jen just put in the chat, can you read an example from the score? And of course, Jen and I share a brain, and I was
Right.
just about to read a excerpt from the score. And the beginnings of this piece and the beginning of the piece I played started the same. It says, listen until you are still. Find your breath slow, placid. As you exhale, draw circles and hold on tightly, stopping the sound.
Mhm.
And so um, that to me is like it's a great setup because it gives me enough as a person playing. It gives me an idea of sounds that can live there and can't, and also it gives me permission to just hold some silence at the beginning and sort of figure out where I fit into things.
Yeah.
But then there's these other instructions. There's sort of like column A and column B.
Yeah.
And so then you've got these other instructions that are saying, if you hear a neighbor, listen a while before starting so they may be heard. And so that to me is more, I mean, it's kind of fun. At the beginning becomes a sort of game of like, who's going to talk first? And then, we were hearing this one sound. And I'm going like this because of the drawing circles
This
thing. And
one
to me,
literally says to do this. Like, yeah.
yeah, this one, and I feel like this piece is much more, like, I guess, uh, it just sort of is more on the nose, I think. I felt like the one that you wrote for us was a little more abstracted, but
Yeah.
I think, and that gets into my next question, but anyhow, I just want to read a little bit more. And then it says, if you hear sound from metal, listen a while and decide to stop. And so that to me that's pretty much like a direct cue, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of like poetry and freedom, but then there are these sort of signposts along the way. And I feel like when I'm performing that kind of music that it's super free because I can relax because I don't have to worry about some kind of ball being dropped or, oh no, the piece is going to accidentally end or something like that, because there are these little signposts that everybody is looking for.
Yeah.
That's just a lot of me talking about why I like your music. I don't know if you have a
No,
response to
well,
that.
I think this is completely right, and these are the things that I hope. And again, the piece from February 2020 that we played in Sextet, like hopefully like opened up like this over time, like from things at the beginning that were extremely direct, that since we had, again, this is a very practical bottom line sort of consideration, but we had 40 minutes to fill. Therefore, like the other problem I had to solve in my imagination is like, how do I get a text that will steer for that length of time without you either getting bored or the thing repeating itself? So
Mm-hmm.
in that case, that seems something really practical to do that, where the yeah, I suppose they're not like opposing modes. Like all of this came up like for a while, like for maybe about 5 years. I spent like every other weekend on an airplane flying from like one remote place in the continent to another, like to go make music over the weekend and then return. And then in all of my own brain confusion, a way to stay centered seemed to be, like once a day on a road trip, like I like wake up and try to knock like one page text out and then get on with my day. And then in the aggregate, like, over a year of this, there'd be a folio that would come together. And then, like some mornings I'm feeling, allegorical or metaphorical for something too. And then the result ends up being like this text that is, may look like concrete things to do, but like they're not instructions that you could realize in sound necessarily, right? It's like, consider something or something completely poetic, and then others of them end up being like almost like line for line recipes. Like, take these ingredients, do this, do this, do
Hmm.
this. By doing these three sorts of things, you may come up with 19 others. In doing these three sorts of things, you'll after following the recipe, you'll get the cake that you intended, right? So of course,
Yeah.
ordering those was maybe the issue for our success. Like this, maybe steering into Leviathan a little bit then too. Like this started as a quartet piece. Like I was just kind of, likewise, it was like for a weekend. Like, oh, can I think of something for? I don't know, like again, there's like another group kind of approached me like, hey, would you ever consider doing something for us? And then we all sort of forgot about it. And then I had one weekend with like nothing to do. And I was like, oh, I have an idea. I better get this out on
Right.
stage as soon as I can. So keyboard, scramble as fast as I can. And then this thing
Yeah.
sort of came out. And then this was like, or as with most things I score too, like every element ends up being important. Like the, I can't believe I'm comparing this as a to a cookbook. It's so banal, right? But yeah, okay, I have a recipe, I have time I have to work with, I have heat in the oven I have to work with, I have these ingredients I have to work with. Let me tell you a few things about how you're going to proportion these things over time, and then the result will be something interesting. And then hopefully the things I specify are clear enough that that someone reading it can react and they know what to do. Um, but if that gave you all of the information, that wouldn't be any fun, right? So like this quartet piece, like that we have adapted for this media, like started this way. It's the two players with stones and a couple of flower pots or breakable ceramics, and then a hammer, and then this other group has like they make instruments that are capable of playing a melody, and then so it's this little folio that the players get that's one-page parts without a score that hold them together. So like someone will get one page and will suggest, do this. If you hear thing A happen around you, you could change. If you hear thing B, you could stop. And then you flip it over on the back, and then it's like, well, okay, thing D might happen. If thing D happens, wait for F, and then you could do this. And it doesn't tell the players what's happening in between. So I don't know, this seemed likewise an interesting way to steer. Like there's something to do, and there are things that might happen as you were saying, might happen in the environment around you that are like signposts. If I hear this thing, it's time to slow down or turn left or stop. Um,
Yeah.
and
Well, I mean,
we had
you
this
talk.
problem. Oh, sorry. We had this problem when we rehearsed together for Red Cat too, where everybody put their hands up and was like, well, what about these 9 other things that are going to happen?
Yeah.
Because like like for example, like we'd have an instruction that we'd be pointing at each other where we'd play, and it's like, okay, I'm listening, and then okay, when Cassia stops, now I turn left, and then there's somebody across the room that all of a sudden in the middle of this phenomenon now is now like dropping a rock like on something, and we have to stop, and somebody puts their hand up and like, well, wait, what about the rock? And then now I'm in an uncomfortable position, but then I have to think like, well, wait, does your text mention the rock? And somebody's like, no, and there's like, well, don't worry about it. Wait for this thing that it does mention.
Right. Right.
So now, like you have a concrete recipe to follow, but since there are other people cooking recipes alongside you that interact, like there are other things that are going to happen that you don't know about in advance. And I don't know, I guess you could decide to react to them or not, but it's like everyone has a little piece of the puzzle that all the pieces come together to make the environment. That is the thing that interests me.
Yeah. And
But I don't want you to know these things because like then like to you it feels spontaneous, and then I have my own chuckling moment in my chair like, yeah, like this is how I steer behind the scenes where you wouldn't necessarily expect it. So like I can get my 40 minutes to make a shape that hopefully is clear, but that you have to find by reading this thing. That I don't know, the interaction between those two things seems interesting to me.
Well, and it is really engaging because I think it keeps the performers are, everything is new and exciting to them. And I think that's like where I bring Erin Damast into this, like why her orchestra was such a great fit for this, or her chamber group, because, she's building these instruments and they're not perfect. Like they're flawed. And so we don't know if they're going to totally work, right? So we're like, watching this arm spinning around on a record player, and maybe it gets stuck, or so, because that's the only way really that one person can perform this quartet,
Yeah.
right? Because otherwise, if it's four people and they know, I mean, sorry, if it's one person who knows all four parts and there's no surprises, right? Like when it says things like, if you hear singing from metal, listen a while and decide to stop, bend it if you like. Well, that can't happen if it's like one person who actually knows. But with Aaron's instruments, they were so fragile and kind of on the edge of working or not. And that real fragility, I think, was what made this possible. Because, yeah, when I asked you, like, hey, do you have a piece that Aaron's ensemble could play? And you're like, well, is she willing to play all four parts?
Yeah. But like, what as happens with us in this all of the time too, like what a wild and wonderful and responsive way of acting in this moment that turned out to be too, in a way that like hit into like something that is also hiding behind the words in the text that I was trying to hit into as well too. Like, so here's Aaron at the beginning of 2021, where we have to be removed from one another for all of these reasons. We can't be together because we'll get sick. We don't know how we can convey this thing out to the rest of the world that is important to us, that we're used to gathering together, that we need to like communicate with one another, like to be healthy and happy and part of like the communities to which we belong, right? Mm-hmm. Not to bring up the global corporate behemoth too, but right, so we're all in uncomfortable relationships with work with respect to this moment as well too, which is sort of intense. She's now all alone in a circumstance that in normal times would like needs her to be part of a little community, and she's doing the work of four people and has to simulate this thing that approximates like our normal interactions. Like, oh my God, that hit it right on the head in really uncomfortable sorts of ways. That it offered like sort of like this meta surprise, right? Like, oh, in a way, like now this sells something really important about contemporary culture and politics in particular, and like collective action that has to do with, as there's this tune that comes in at the end of it that's been used
yeah, that's,
over
I don't want
250 years.
to like derail you, but I wanted to like talk about the fact that you like here, I'm just gonna show this. This is the
notes.
Printed piece of paper with notes on a page. This might be the first thing in Music for Your Inbox that's actually, I don't want to say that because I could be wrong, but I think there was one Joycey piece that was actually notes on a page. But at any rate, you've got these tunes and they come in a lot of your work and of these text scores. And so it's like everything is free, and a lot of it is found objects or repurposed things. And then there's these folk melodies that you've sort of collected in your pocket, like like if you pick a rock up at the side of the road and just sort of carry it around in your pocket for a while. I feel like you've just got all these little tunes. And you always refer to it as bringing a tune, or not always, but I have seen it referred to in that way. And you'll say like, oh, in the version I play, it was saying like, maybe you want to bring a tune, and there's these like options of how to bring them. But for Erin, the tune kind of had to be there as this structural tentpole again, so that she could be running around and turning on and off all of her instruments. But yeah, I'm just curious like about these tunes and how you sort of, I guess everyone can see through the paper. I'll put the other one behind it, but how you can kind of.
God, this is so embarrassing. I don't stand for treble clefs, definitely. Or
well, this is not a calligraphy chat. This is not like fireside chat on music notation. I'm just saying that they're free. I want to show people that it's not like rhythmically notated. It's like here's longer bits and here's shorter bits, and here's a fermata. And then I don't really know what that diamond at the beginning.
That I stole from the Tricentric Foundation collections too. Like Anthony Braxton uses that for like any transposition or any clef, right?
Oh, okay, right.
So like if you're reading like the bigger systems with that too, it's like, okay, violists out there, you want to read this in alto clef, feel free. Just it's like it gives you a door you can walk through to make a decision. And once you've made a decision, now you have to follow through clearly with the consequences of that. James Ogenfritz, yep.
Yeah. James is like,
So,
funny you should mention that. Yeah, I
okay.
think so. You've got these tunes. In this particular piece, you have one tune, so there's
Yeah.
fewer options because when I played, there were like several.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep.
So did you pick it because you wanted to retain that kind of political message within this piece?
Well, I'm lying if I'm saying I can retain any of this. Like, I feel like I can hint at things. Um, by assembling a notebook like this that hopefully allows you, we get in deep water when we start talking about agency with this stuff, right? Like,
Yeah.
so here's the tension. Like I want you to contribute as much to this as you can. Like, okay, like I've been asked to supply a composition, but I don't want to tell you what to do. If I don't do enough, like, well, okay, so like we're in an engagement back and forth where like hopefully both sides of this conversation are honored, right? Like I have to be careful because I'm dancing dangerously close to things I talk about in lessons with my students that end up being, I get cranky in the other direction of the thing I want to talk about. So I'm working with you. I want to open the door for you to walk through it so you can have agency to find things. If either side of our conversation gets out of balance, now it's no longer and it's no longer dialogue back and forth. And like since both of us have had this experience too, like there is a rhetoric. Like if write the manuscript again over the shoulder on your right, which I can't see, but let's just use that. All right. Well, okay. So that is a thing. Like so, here's a recipe from 1750 that shows up that you have to execute this amount of detail to get the cake that's that part of the dialogue. And then there are other doors you can walk through that are open for you because they're not specified there. But the things that are in the recipe you have to do, or it's not the sixth cello suite or something like that. You know, since we're all composers and improvisers and interpreters and we bounce off all of each other, it's like, okay, well, we have skills and ways of working in both directions that hopefully are accessible at the same time. So there's a minimum amount that I have to put in the room to be my part of that interaction, and then hopefully if I can find ways to leave something else open, you can get it. Even though I've put a recipe book in front of you, like you have hopefully as much power as I do over what the end result is going to be. In a bigger collective of us, hopefully everyone has as much power over what the end result is going to be as a person who put the recipe book down. And then that way collectively we can find a solution to this thing, but in this case, since I'm not playing, my contribution is the recipe book, right? So so that's practical in terms of like how to solve this just as a way of working. Okay, this so far doesn't say anything about why I'm stealing the melodies I like, or this one in particular.
But that's okay, because you just answered my next question, which was going to be like, how do you walk this line between being like a capital C composer and like giving people enough space to say what they want to say? And I think, I mean, you just sort of spoke about that, but I think that for this particular version that we're presenting in June of your piece, you're actually not playing in it. I mean, you provided the recording of the tune that you brought, but your Aaron's totally there. So then I feel like your composer bit is even a little like you've got less skin in the game in a weird way. Like in the version that we played at Red Cat, you know, your ass is on the line too, because you're sitting on stage and you're saying like, yeah, I wrote this, but it's also me improvising this and that. Whereas for this version that we're presenting, I mean, it's just Aaron performing and her instruments. And so yeah, I was because you've spent so much time on like the other side of the fence of people being like, this is my piece, and I'm just like, yeah, I think you've talked enough about that bit, but if you want to say anything more about this like big composer thing.
If I can steer out the tunes I'm stealing then too, God, this is probably 10 years ago now. That's amazing too. But I remember like I was on a house show in a basement in Nashville, the sorts of places like we normally hang out, and right. So here's a room that's basically the size of the 8 people who can fit into it who are playing that night, and it's one set of us like scraping rocks, and then 3 singer-songwriters, which you would expect, right? So hey, cool, Townes Van Zandt covers. Like this person has 2 originals. This is an awesome folk duo, and then this shouldn't work together. But but it is like we're that for all. I don't want to speak for you or for anyone else who does this either too, but we're essentially folk musicians, right? Like in a really like, I don't know, like it feels like this is like a homespun craft or something. Like you're inventing at home. Like I have 6 rocks and these 2 drum related things that are in the shelf behind me, and I'm gonna weave them together into something that only I can figure out. And it's here in my living room. And the first time you want to see it, it's gonna be here in my living room anyway. If we ever bring this out to the world, it's gonna be on like communications sort of at that level of scale. Right, for obvious practical reasons, like our things survive in warehouses and bookstores and basements and living rooms. And again, waving at the chat, like everyone I see so far is thank you all for putting me on in your basement, bookstore, and or living room over the past 20 years. I really appreciate it. But like, so what is it? Like, here's something really intimate that people are sharing in a really small space. Like, here you go. Like, and that was like, oh, obviously, why would this be any different? But this is completely the same, right? So,
Right.
So there's that fact. There's the other practical nerdy fact. I don't know. Like my drive commute music is sad country musicians with guitars and folk musicians basically. And I've just probably for 6 years I've just been, nibbling around the edges of this thing that I didn't really know about.
Well, I think it's really powerful, like this, the bringing the tune and the patience required to bring it. Like I've watched your video and listened to the recording, the video we're launching like on June 20th.
Yep.
I've watched it from beginning to end, like at least 10 times, and even on the day I remember recording your piece, and we're in human resources and like you're way the hell over there with your mask on and I'm lying practically on the floor looking at a camera with my mask on, and Jen's over there and Aaron's performing, and it was a really intense session because we're all trying not to die from COVID, and also like the guy delivering onions at the pho restaurant next door and like all the rest of it. And there's tinkering, there's this, there's that, and then the tune comes in and I was just like weeping. Like it's just so powerful. And then I thought, oh well, you're just overwhelmed and overtired and all that. But I gotta tell you, like every single time I watch that video and I know it's coming, right? Because I know the bit. I mean, I'm not going to spoil it, but I know the bit where she's hitting this thing and wiggling on that thing, and then this tune comes in, and you're just like, oh. So, yeah, I guess you were just writing like incredibly slow pop music or something.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there are more interesting reasons than this too, but practically this seemed like, okay, well, is there a way that when we all go out into the world and we give workshops about this stuff too, or like like you've had experiences teaching as well too, where like we all like give lip service to the rhetoric like that this style of making music should be able to accept anything, right? Like I remember hearing that from like Eddie Prevo from A&M like 20 years ago, right? Like, okay, every noise has a note. Like this method can accept anything you want to bring into the room that you want. And we all say that, and it's like we don't really mean it, right? Like, so I don't mean that either, right? Like this text's ability to accept, hypothetically like a virtuosic like display idiomatically wouldn't really make any sense. But like so practically I was curious about this too, like, okay, is this a way to accept in like things like melodies and tunes and other materials that I normally don't do anything because, right, I show up, I have my 2 cymbals that I know how to bow, and I have this rock, and you're getting that, which makes me really happy. But right, like, is this a way where like these other sorts of things that I think are interesting and important, have been and meaningful to me, can just sort of float into the room and act like the other objects, right?
Right.
So then,
yeah.
So I have this idea. I'm just collecting these things on the radio and like listening to musicians when I can in person, and then like, as again, like politics and culture are super messy to deal with right now, especially at this moment. But so I'm already on a kick for music that's 400 and 500 and 800 years old that somehow has survived. Like here's this one like specific like melodic tradition that came from Ireland and Scotland, that came with like my great 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 grandparents somehow, and that ended up in Appalachia, and that became like the basis of, fiddle music, and like one thread that became like the the sound of the culture in this part of the world. I know
Yeah, well, I
I'm
mean,
leaning
it's
around a lot of things this way too, but right, obviously, like these things are reused, right? So like as
right.
with if this, like, okay, so here's a song that means one thing in one place, it's the same melody with different lyrics. In the second one, if it jumps the ocean, now somebody's using it for this purpose and playing it on this instrument and not this, right? There's the things that happen as people interact and bounce off of one another. Um, so this tune specifically is likewise from a fiddle piece from about like 1750, I guess, and um, like there's like Leon Rosselson, like and Hamish Henderson are like British and Scots like singers who are in the habit of like repurposing these things for socialist like ends, right? So I got to the end of like I'm listening to some record on a drive and I hear this and this one hits me in the stomach and like, oh, here's this like solidarity song that like seems like vaguely important right now in 2021, especially given that we're all separate and locked in our rooms. At the whims of some pretty intense negative cultural forces, and one of which involves the way we work and engage with each other. And here's this thing that, oh, a collectivity might be of interest to you right now. Oh, I get it. Great. If I float this into the room, I can gently suggest that there's this other thing that you might think about at the same
Right.
time that this thing is unfolding. If you don't know about it, hopefully, like, it still packs a punch the same way, just in terms of the pace that it unfolds, in terms of when it shows up in the room, in terms of what Aaron was doing just before the thing enters the room, in ways where, like, hopefully all of these sorts of things might reflect on this experience together. I'm
Well, I think
babbling.
like that's a theme, like this collection, this idea. You're talking about collecting these songs, and I mean, Erin's whole chamber ensemble is built out of these collected and found and repurposed objects. I mean, she's got. I was texting her about asking her because I was trying to write about it, and I was saying, like, I remember there's a mic clip and there's a jewelry stand and there's a kids record player, and then she's like, and a tent spike. Don't forget the tent spike, and it's like, yeah, all these beautiful found fragile things. And then actually our postcard artist this month is Paul Pescador, and they were really taken with the whole idea of collecting things. I'm just gonna like slide this in. I'm probably holding it the wrong way, so I'm just gonna like slowly rotate it. But they've got all these found objects too, because they were inspired by that same sort of theme of like finding and collecting and repurposing and kind of showing it in this different light. And we were just really happy that all these artists kind of you're all kind of pointing at the same thing. And so we just sort of wanted to like point that at people and see if we don't have some kind of like secret agenda of socialism. I mean, you get your inbox, by the way. Maybe we do. But at any rate, oh, skeleton on the bottom, Jen says. Thank you. Okay, so here's our postcards. But I'm saying that it's just, it's very cool to see how we're all just pointing at this stuff together and sort of saying, well, what do you make of this? And what did you do with your collected objects? And so I suppose in that way, we kind of are these folk musicians just reinterpreting the same material through different lens. Sorry, I just like love this postcard so much, which is great because I do have 1,000 of them. Not for long. I'll be mailing them out soon. I wanted to read just a little bit about like a little bit more from your score, if it's cool with you.
Yeah, sure.
Just because it's really beautiful, and now I've got like, okay, so there's all these beautiful lines that are saying like, for player number 2, they wait, listen until you are still. If you hear a melody, wait a while. If you hear singing from metal, listen a while and decide to stop. Bend it if you like. And then we get to the sort of the instruction page, and it's just a million different, like, if this, then that, but if not this, then, and it's sort of fun in the way that maybe a legal document is fun, but they've got stuff that says, like, if for 4 players, 2 players use pitch stones, a ceramic tile or flower pot, and a hammer. And then it goes on to be, like, really, really specific. And I'm curious, like, do you tailor that if you're writing the piece for a specific ensemble, or do you feel like those instructions live for this piece forever? Like, how does that
Yeah.
work?
Well, that it's arbitrary. Like, since this was a hypothetical response from a hypothetical, well, sorry, it's not. It's these are real people. But like, none of us expected this like to actually be a thing. But I knew like, okay, one of the people involved with this group, like this was like two duos that are separated geographically, and one of them was a dear friend and one of my former students, Joe Barry, who might be in the chat. If so, hey. But like, I know Joe is in the habit of like cutting pieces of metal like into metal phones, and like, in addition to being a really sick jazz drummer, also, was into building cigar box banjos and these sorts of things. So it's like, okay, there is this contingent in the room that might be interested in working together, that I know they do these sorts of things, and I know like this is a case where this is a quartet that might come together once a year, and they might not have a chance to meet otherwise. So okay, maybe can I make the parts detachable so that practically, I'm trying to solve this problem, like, if they want to try a thing like this, can they do so without the other people being in close proximity? So
Right, and also bringing all the right stuff. I mean,
yeah,
honestly, there's some just practical
so
considerations here.
yeah, I guess this is it. Like the part of the recipe that tells you like how many eggs and how much sugar and how much flour you need, like that has to be there. And there's a tough way to say that poetically that still gets the right proportions of things. So in this case and a few others, it was like, okay, I know what these folks are doing. Pick this stuff, and then we'll try to steer how we listen and how we interact in this more abstract sorts of way.
Right.
In a way, that happened for us in our sextet at Red Cat because of the six of us, right? Like, I know you carry a viola and a tape deck and some rattly things, and I know Cody Putman carries a bassoon and some squeaky toys, and Mustafa Walker has a hurdy-gurdy and some rattly things, and I know Lars Steenberg like will probably have a gamba and several things I can't anticipate. And that step is taken care of because we know each other, and this is what we do and how we act. So in a way, like, that part of the recipe is taken care of when we decide who's grouping together. So in this case, there's a specific list of instructions so that it could go out to folks who are not us, or in theory, you could reproduce this if we hadn't been working together before. But like, this amount is necessary in order to have the materials in the room that will yield like this slowly moving form that happens if you follow the other instructions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's sort of, I feel like for Erin, when she made this video, she was, wearing 4 different hats at the same time, and she could see all the parts. But something that I don't know if we've even mentioned yet is that, and I could be totally wrong on this, but I feel like in the version that I played, I didn't know everybody else's instructions. So I very much had like my own part. And I think that's the key. I felt like that was a key to, it's sort of like nobody could dither or bide their time or just do something for a while. You know what I'm saying? They had to really be intentional.
Yep.
And I just thought it was so cool that you cracked the code. Like you had listened to enough people creating this music, and then, we all hit these same roadblocks, and you somehow figured out this way to like get people through that and beyond it. And it's sort of this game, I guess.
Yeah,
in a way.
This is what I hope would result from this, and is like, I don't know, we toss around the word experimental in these communities too in a way that maybe isn't completely accurate, but yeah, like this is the experiment, I think, in this case, sort of too. Like what will this yield if you have to pay attention to this minimum,
right?
But there's nothing here to tell you how to shape your interaction with this minimum that nonetheless has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
If nothing else, like it gave some steering, I think. Well, I don't know. Again, if I can reflect on this experience from a decade ago, where like, hey, can you make us something that acts like how you hear? We all hear.
No,
how do we deal with that? We all hear differently, right? This seemed to be a way to suggest like how I would play, and generally, if left to my own devices.
I think that's true, because like I've played with you enough at this point without necessarily scores, but I feel like there's these rules that evolve, and you kind of created almost like a cheat sheet. Like,
Yeah.
there's rules about like go forward, don't go backwards. And what I mean by that is like you have a sound and you make it and you do it and then that's over and then you go to the next thing. There's no like, oh, I'm going to keep coming back to this bowl of marbles, But then of course there's the day when you just keep coming back to the bowl of marbles. So I'm not saying these are hard, fast rules, but I think that these text scores that you've created are really they feel like there's something that I'm really interested in too, is like fast tracking people to getting to the point of being able to play together. Because there's the slow way that you and I have certainly adopted, where you just meet regularly, you get together, you hash it out, you listen to your rehearsals, you decide what you liked, what you didn't like, what working and not working. But then, what if these people just get together and they've only got that day or week or 2 hours or something? These text scores are really a way to kind of throw people into the deep end and actually have a successful time.
Yeah, I think that's right. Or that's what I'm hoping for by trying to steer this sort of experience.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I feel like it's successful, and part of the reason that I wanted to put this piece with Erin, not this piece, but a piece of yours with Erin's chamber group. I keep calling it a chamber group. It's like as if she's rehearsing the string quartet, but she on her Instagram she's always got like, oh, here's the next thing, and I've got a spring with a toothpick that's scratching on this piece of metal, and it's just it's really exciting. She's creating this whole band and stuff, and I wanted a piece that her ensemble could perform, but obviously not obviously, but like they're not going to play like a Mozart wind trio or something, because they can't, they're not that predictable, which is what makes them so fantastic. So your music had enough freedom in it, but then enough structure that it's still a piece. How many of these things do you have? Because I feel like every time I ask you, there's just like one lying around.
There's a vault of them sitting on a folder on a hard drive that's gathering dust in a locked room somewhere that hopefully I could draw in as we get. But like we all do, like there's a period of time where I can throw time and energy at them, and then that goes away, and then 6 months go by, and then I can revisit it, and then something shows up in between, like that's a different shiny object that I have to go chase over in this direction for a while, right? And then yeah, so as with anything, I'm very much a dog chasing squirrels at this point. Like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's interesting. Oh,
yeah.
and yeah, that set the chat off. Good. This one I try to come back to maybe every 6 or 8 months as it shows up, and then I'll crank out 14 of them. Right.
Yeah.
It's obviously this isn't the sort of thing, especially if I'm comparing it to a journal. This isn't like where it's going to take a year to build exactly the correct listening erector set that will lead us to the ideal realization. Like it really is sort of a journaling sort of activity. Like, oh, here's an attempt at something, and then maybe I'll print it out and bring it when we show up there in Pasadena, like once or twice a year, as I start really getting curious what it'll yield.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I really want you to keep sort of hammering away at this project, I think, or whatever to call it. It's your way of processing all of these thoughts, and the fact that you have so much experience in this. Well, in the notes on a page world, honestly, I mean, you've certainly spent your fair share of time playing exactly the right sound at exactly the right time at exactly the right volume and all of that, and then to be completely free, and then to take what you know from both of those and create these poems. I don't know what to call them.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate the encouragement with it too. Right, it's not evident to me that this would work, that it does work. What utility does it have? Mm-hmm. What utility does it have? That's really dangerous. Or especially like we're left alone. Like, I mean, I'm punching around politics with this as well too, right? But like the point of any of this is it for its own sake, right? It's not like there's, or no, that's something that's been really, really important and affirming. as an improvising musician for 20 years, and especially in the case where you are playing basements and warehouses, as you know really well too, that yields sleeping on couches and eating trickily and not sleeping very well and driving a lot for maybe audiences that are not as, expansive as you would hope for in that, right? So like, what is the thing that's feeding you, right? If it's not
Right.
for that itself, like there's not another reward. Like this is, or I
Yep.
don't, right? This is Bill Dixon from forever ago too, right? The reward for any of this is that it's what you do, right? Like,
Hmm.
um, and I've been repeatedly lucky that I've gotten to hang out with people in communities and scenes and jumped into boats that are all sustaining in this sort of way.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of this. I feel like these scores are, I guess you like. I don't want to say giving back so much, but like contributing. Like I love how you refer to the people as neighbors. I don't know. It just got my mind thinking when I was performing these pieces when I was a performer. Um, well, even just out of the gate, if you hear a neighbor, listen a while before starting, so they may be heard. Well, that was so neat to me when I was in this larger ensemble because then I started to be thinking like, okay, well, my actual neighbor, as in the woman on my right hand side, has begun to play, so I will listen to her. But what if Cody, who's like all the way over stage left, is he my neighbor? Like you're just starting to kind of and like once you like logic your way in and out of these things, and once you have thought that far, the reality is like Cassia, if you want to play along with Cody, that's
Go
fine.
for it. Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
right. You have
know?
decided that you have this relationship in this
Yeah,
practically across the geography of the stage in this case, and then
right.
like empathetically, like, oh, like this is a sound that has entered the room when I before I've started to act, and I have a way to help it. Therefore, I'm going to.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. This is. I don't want to rant about this thing in particular too, but like sometimes, um, like music communities like are not maybe as careful about the use of this word in which that I would like to, right? Where a lot of times, like when we say community, we mean audience. We're building community. We're finding more people to listen and share our concerts in a way that's like practical. If I say it's transactional, that goes a little bit too far. It's a little bit too heavy, but it's imprecise, but only by scale. Like a community is something you belong to. Like, okay, like where if you get a flat tire, this person's going to come out and help you and to
Hmm.
help you change the tire, right? Like it's not transactional. It's not audience for, with respect to makers. Like it's literally like here's. I don't know, every word I put into the room about this is problematic. So I'm saying this before I do this, right? But like it's even like I want to have a conversation with you. I want to work together with you. We have both decided this like in a way where hopefully like we've made more than we would have had otherwise if we had stayed atomized, right?
Yeah.
And you
Well,
decide to do that, and if you respect the other person in dialogue with you, like you can't like do this or this with respect to that relationship because it gets in the way. If I can
mhm.
make that happen in the print, oh my God, that's interesting. Like in a way that hopefully mirrors what would happen like in the room with people who want to join this interaction. So okay, so like words like partners and neighbors in the score that I suggested are things like that. So a neighbor is someone who brought something that you didn't expect. Okay, you've decided to engage that. Now you're a partner with them.
Mhm.
And hopefully, like you're like, well, hopefully, we've all been in like strange interactions on a bandstand where like maybe that didn't feel like it was aligned
Right.
as we would like, right? But hopefully, still, if everyone is being sincere, like it's moving that way in a way that hopefully makes like a real community, like it's not transactional.
Well, I think it
Don't
is.
we
I
need
mean,
more? Oh, sorry.
when you're talking about community, you're right. I wasn't even thinking about necessarily like growing the audience. I was more thinking
Right,
about the fact that like you're probably going to sit in the audience, then you're going to play a set, then you'll be the composer of the
right,
next piece. Like I'm talking about this
right.
whole, because the 8 people in the basement, you know, are performing and composing in the basement and washing the dishes, and we're all kind of doing this for each other. And others are welcome in, clearly. And this is what I feel like these scores do, is they give people kind of like a quick jump in sort of thing. And it's also people coming from everywhere and bringing all these different things. This is really a helpful guide to like finding a way to have those people connect with each other. Even though, because like in the sextet that we played, I had played with most of those people individually and in other groups, but I had never played in that exact configuration. So yeah, I guess I just keep saying the same thing over and over again. I just really love these text pieces in there. They're so pretty. Everyone can see. Even the formatting and the space on the page, like it just makes me feel like there's enough room for me somewhere, like in this bit there, and then I'll read a bit more.
Yeah, that's my hope, definitely.
Yeah. Well, do you feel like you said all the things that you needed to say?
Oh, I think I said 16 sentences more than I ever would like to. So, all right, I love all of you, but yeah, I'm talking. It's not that shows a mode of interaction here.
No, we think you're fantastic, Tim, and I don't know. We're so excited about Erin and your
Likewise,
collaboration for this
likewise,
video.
it's so gorgeous. Like, or what an amazing path. Like she figured it to. Again, especially like now, like we're atomized. Like, what's a version of this thing that responds to the ways that we have had to be atomized for the last year and a half? Like, I thank you, Erin.
Yeah, no,
Really,
she really just made it all kind of make sense, and I just really love these like chamber ensembles of
yeah.
machines that are sort of working or not working, and I love just watching her little tape measure try and like hop over the edge of the metal piece, and yeah, anyhow, I can't wait for everyone to see it, honestly. I'm super excited to launch it into the world. So anyhow, thanks so much, Tim. Thanks for taking the time to do this, and
Thank you.
thanks
This
for
is a
being
lot.
you. We'll talk to you soon. Take good care.
That's great. You too.
Okay,
Thanks, Erin.
bye.